All right, welcome everybody to another YouTube Live success story. Really excited to be here with Adam to share all his insights and his journey. Really amazing score and story with a 780 Q49 V51. And I know you're going to learn a lot from him. He has got some really great advice on how to approach your prep, make the most of your time. Just a few quick announcements before we jump in. I'm Ben Resnick. I'm a GMAT expert, full-time specialist since 2016, and a TTP live teach instructor. And yeah, want this to be as engaging and fun as possible. So definitely shoot your questions away as we go, and we'll try and cover as much as we can. And as always, please, gotta say it, like, subscribe, and comment. And one note on the comments is if you think about what's your top takeaway from today and then put that in the comments, that's just a good habit in general that I always do. Try to do in general is to process things, think about the top takeaways, comment on it. That kind of writing habit in general as you approach things is helpful. And let's jump in. So first off, Adam, tell us a bit about your background and what got you motivated for the GMAT.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ben. Happy to be here and help out. So my background is I graduated in 2016 with a degree in chemical engineering. And then I also went back and got a master's in fire protection engineering. And for the past, I think, 5 or 6 years, I've been working in the as an engineering consultant in the real estate and construction industries. And I kind of found that I like the business side more than the engineering side, which made me start looking into business schools, and then which led me to the GMAT, and which kind of got me where I am today.
Makes sense. That's very good. And tell us a little bit about your starting point, how you found TTP,
Yep.
and yeah, how you got started with the process, and then we'll go into your whole story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't really know what the GMAT was, so I started Googling things and Googled some like practice questions, and just did kind of unstructured practice, just kind of figure out what the questions actually were. And I did that for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I had gotten some advice to start with an official practice test to kind of assess where you were. So I did that. I ended up getting a 720, I believe, which kind of told me I was already in a good spot. With some more focused studying, I knew I could bring that up. And a different friend had mentioned that he had used TTP. He loved it, so I gave it a shot. And obviously it worked out, but that's kind of how I got into it.
Oh, that's great. That's cool. And so, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the TTP. What did you
Sure.
like in terms of the features,
Mhm.
and what did you use? Any tips for people how to get the most out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key advantage of TTP over other courses is like all the courses are going to teach you the quant skills and the reading skills. But the difference with TTP is it teaches you how to actually strategize and take the GMAT specifically. So it doesn't just teach you math skills, it teaches you how to answer specific GMAT questions. Um, and understanding how the test was designed and what they're looking for in these questions helps you, first of all, answer more accurately, but also more quickly, which being a time test is huge to save time when you can. Um, my process was I did mostly the written lessons and then the practice questions. I know they have the live instruction, they have videos, flashcards, things like that. That's just not really how I learn best, but there are a lot of options based on your learning style.
Yeah, that makes sense. And did you use any of the, you said not so much flashcards. That is
Yep.
something I often recommend, but it sounds like it obviously worked great. Were there any other, did you go back and redo any of your mistakes, or
Yep.
that's something I often do recommend as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was key for me was I used the I forget exactly what it's called, the tracker
Maybe
of all your wrong answers.
oh, the tracker. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
good. Yeah.
that was like
Yeah.
that was how I did most of my practice questions.
Right.
And you really have to be honest with yourself and like give it a full effort each time, even if you keep getting things wrong,
Right.
because that's how you're going to improve and get better. But it's tough to, especially when you first start, get a lot of things wrong. Especially for, I think, a lot of people who are trying to aim for these scores are usually pretty like used to being good at things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, definitely have to be
Yeah.
cautious
Yeah.
of that.
That's a common one. And actually, I think in our last week, we heard that it came out of the, like, thought they completely bombed the first section of the test, and it was
Yeah.
actually like a really great score. So that's really common.
Yeah.
There are some tough questions on there, the TTP, and like you said, you may get it wrong multiple times. So don't let that discourage you. There's this common myth that feels like, oh, I should just be able to read the answer and maybe not even have to redo it. And then even when I would do redo it, oh, I should know it. And there's a lot of this shooting on ourselves, where really like just have the patience with it and do the redos. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And even by the end of the course, there were some that like had been on there for months, and I still
Right.
like some
Right.
real tricky ones. So don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think that's really great what you did with the error tracker. So I think basically, if people haven't seen that, the idea is you're logging what's the cause of the error. And I'll actually just add a little more color to this. I have this mantra that I often encourage people to use, which is and just in terms of reminding themselves, review, reflect, redo. And that reflect part is what we're talking about with the error tracker, is thinking about, looking at the solution and then thinking about what was the cause of the error, how can we prevent it in the future. So for example, you misread the question. So next time, the way I like to encourage people is think about what's that habit we can do next time, like reread, double check exactly what it's asking for, proactively prevent that mistake. And actually, there are a couple of questions here that I kind of connect to this topic of how were you able to get that 51 and really maybe some ways you proactively prevented mistakes. And then there's a lot of questions here, but then they're asking specifically about the SC and the CR and the timing. So if you want to touch on any of that, we'll try and get to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So to follow up on your like in the error tracker where you can
Oh yeah. Yeah.
categorize
Sure.
why you made an error, that was really important to really make sure you're not just flying through why you got the error. Make sure you try to categorize it correctly. Because one of them was like you made like a simple math mistake. So I knew, on like my review day, I would just go through all of those at the same time,
Right.
and just focus like a little bit extra because I knew how to do it. I just made a mistake earlier versus things where I just completely didn't understand the concept. That meant those questions I had to actually go back and relearn. So I think that's a good way to keep you organized. And then moving forward to kind of the questions on verbal, I wasn't aiming for a score. You study for as long as you have time for, as best you can, and then I wasn't aiming to get like, oh, I want to get 90% of the questions right. The goal was to get every single one right. Almost always that's not going to happen, and I absolutely shocked myself when it did. I think I got really lucky with the questions they asked me, just played into my strengths. Which, I mean, if there's only, I think verbal is 36 questions, like they can't cover everything. So I got lucky that they didn't hit the things I didn't know. In some other previous like practice tests, I was getting like 42, 43, 44. So you have to go in with the mindset of you want to get every single question right. Don't go in and think, oh, I only need X number of questions, and expect to get some wrong. And then like specific, like how to study for those questions, I think the CR questions took me a while to really understand. At the beginning, I was getting a lot of those wrong, and even during my studying towards the end was definitely not perfect. But I think what helped me a lot was understanding that there will always be one right answer. So during studying, don't guess. Like on the test, you're probably going to have to guess sometimes, but when you're studying, there were some that took me 20, 25 minutes just slowly thinking through. And that's how you practice and get better. And then eventually it'll speed up. But you always want to find and be able to like explain why you're choosing an answer.
Yeah, that's all great points. So I want to highlight a few things there. So the always one right answer is a really important one, and taking the time. I think a lot of people do resist that idea of like take your time early on, right? It feels like, oh, but I can't, I don't have all that time. And so taking that time to really think why the wrongs are wrong and the right is right. Another way to think about it is if you made a mistake on verbal, there's really two mistakes. You've eliminated the correct answer and also chosen the incorrect answer. So it sounds like you are doing a really good job of reflecting through that. I really like that. The CR, like you said, can definitely take a while to get down. Something for me I found really helpful is you start to notice certain patterns and like noticing the language. And so I was actually teaching like some varying difficulty of like cause and effect assumptions yesterday, and I noticed that the students are having a harder time where on the first lesson when it's less directly stated, but there's still like a causation argument there. It's just a little bit more of an implied. And then when you notice, for example, like a causation, the most common weakener for that is an alternate cause. And so like as you get more experience with it, seeing more questions, reflecting, like you said, taking that time to think through it, your brain's gonna more automatically pick up on these things. And then the timing becomes way less of an issue as it becomes more automatic. So this idea of like automaticity, it's a word I actually got from John Wooden, who's like the Hall of Fame, like legendary basketball coach. But this idea of like, yeah, we want everything to become more automatic. I mean, there's still going to be thinking involved, but it just becomes more ingrained. I'd be curious how did you kind of notice that as well? That like, I mean, there's still the thinking, but it's like becomes
Right.
more automatic in some ways.
Yeah, I think so. Especially the more I practice the framework, you just jump right into it. You don't have to think about how to do it. Instead of like right at the beginning, you didn't know what to look for. You didn't know how to connect things together.
Right.
And it was a lot more overwhelming.
Yeah, exactly. Things start to connect. The other thing I'd say is that marker words, like, noticing certain words like therefores and howevers on the reading comp. I don't know, did you, that was something I actually helped with writing and the reading comp. I don't know if that was a challenge for you at all, but found really helpful is like noticing certain marker language and potentially someone actually asked about sentence correction too, like noticing splits between was, were, and these kind of things. Did that play you think into your success as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's only going to be so much information you can use to make a decision. So
Right.
if you can
Right.
figure out which parts that are important and which ones aren't,
Right.
that's going to help you succeed. And like you said, the therefore, the switches, those are all parts of the
Right.
information that you have. Yeah.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, definitely. The overwhelming, like when you said that word overwhelming at first, that is something we
Yeah.
often hear. So stick with it, be patient.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and it will get ingrained a lot more in.
Mhm.
One other thing I heard you say is review day. Were you just going based on the calendar exactly in the study plan, or adjusting to your own calendar? So I'd be curious. I'm glad you had a review day. But maybe talk a little bit more about that in terms of your structure, what your daily schedule looked like, weekly schedule,
Mhm.
managing it with other priorities in your life, and any sacrifices. I know I give you like 7 questions at once. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So big picture schedule stuff. Yeah. So when I started, I just followed through the order of like the lessons. Um, it didn't have like a strict day by day what I wanted to accomplish. It was more like what I had time for that day. Typically, I would either like 3 to 4 days during the week, I'd study for maybe 1 to 2 hours a night. And then on the weekends, wake up and I knew I was going to be doing it for 3 to 4 hours. Um, when I knew I had free time, people weren't going to be bothering me. Nobody wants to hang out at 9 in the morning on a Saturday. So,
Right.
um, yeah, so waking up a little earlier than I might have liked to, but it's important to just you. It's a big course and it's a big test to learn. You're not going to do it all at once, so just like slowly take chunks out of it. And then, I guess when I talked about like the review day, there were some chapters or lessons that were a lot longer or denser or had like way more practice problems. So I try to alternate. Um, like if I was doing quant like the lessons, I would do like a verbal review and then kind of switch off, um, just to keep things a little bit more fresh rather than like trying to plow through lessons for 4 hours in a row.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. Alternating it, doing more review than you even think is necessary is
Mhm.
like, or just in general, and putting some extra review is often a good habit. So that's really
Yeah.
good. Um, Excellent. And then let's see. So there was a question here about the approach closer to exam day,
Mhm.
mocks. And then, yeah, I also like to ask people if they have any routines on the day of and any things you do both physically and mentally.
Mhm.
I think in your notes you sent me, you said to, make sure to emphasize that wellness aspect, which I often encourage too. So
Yes, absolutely. So I guess I'll start with the first one. We got closer to test day. So I had scheduled my test before I was done with the course. I think in the strategy guide it says not to do that, but I just wanted to get it done with. So you don't have to do everything 100% according to plan, but just, try to get 80, 90% and you'll be more than good. But I scheduled my test and then I worked backwards from there to figure out like um, my mock exams and then just how to finish the last few lessons. And that's when I got a lot more structured and took more time out of my social life. And that was pretty much every day, just trying to get through things. When I did the mock tests, I did the official practice test. I did one every 3 days, I think is what I had time for. I would do the exam. The next day, I would review the specific exam questions, and then the third day, I would just review everything that I had gone wrong before. I think I did two. Yeah, I did two practice exams before my real exam. I was feeling great. Got two 770s on my practice exams. Go in the morning of the exam. I did the real ones in the morning. I did the practice ones in the morning just to kind of simulate that.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, personally, that's just how I do better. Some people might do better in the afternoon. Totally a personal thing. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. Um, so the first test I did, the official one, I actually got a 730, and it was like these several months of studying and all these practice tests, and then I was like, oh, I did 10 points better than my first one. Like that really sucks. So took the rest of the day and just like took that time to not think about it. And then afterwards just studied a little bit more. I took another mock exam and got another 770. So I was like, okay, I feel comfortable that the real day of the exam, that was the outlier. Maybe I was just a little nervous or stressed or just got unlucky with questions. So I ended up scheduling the second one, doing a little bit more studying, but at that point I kind of knew what level I was at and I was just gonna go for it again. Then I sat for the second one. I felt like I did much worse during. So like I I do the quant and verbal first and then the other kind of smaller sections after. And I just, you know, did like maybe 40% effort during the essay. I'm like, this test is way worse. There's no point trying here. And then scores come up and I couldn't believe it. So I think that's another tip as well. When you're taking the tests, you have no idea how well you're doing. Don't try to guess. Don't try to
Right.
see what you're doing. Just focus on each problem and whatever happens is going to happen.
Totally. That's great advice. Super common. I hear that people are judging the
Yeah.
score overall, or another thing I see is people judging the question difficulty and assuming that like, oh, that's an easy one, so I must have done bad, and oh, this is a hard one, and then like panicking on the hard one. And the
Yeah.
reality is that the difficulty will actually vary a lot. So there's really
Mhm.
no way to know how well you're doing. You just have to wait to the end. And you do get the score at the end. It's not like in the old days, my
Yeah.
SAT was like 3 weeks wait, which is
Right.
like kind of agonizing, right? So
Yeah.
just
It's like
wait your
pretty
2 hour,
immediate
two
too.
hours, right? And the focus
Yeah.
edition now is only 2 hours 20 minutes
Mhm.
or so, 225 with the break. Yeah, and then I think also highlight what you said with the outlier with the practice tests. I think I do recommend that people do it like you did and gauge their readiness based on the practice tests. And I like your attitude about it. Of course you're going to be disappointed, but giving yourself time to take a second one. It is quite common for that first one to be some nerves,
Mhm.
or whatever, and just have an outlier there and then settle in more. So definitely do recommend in general that people give themselves time and flexibility to not get crushed if that first one doesn't go quite as you want it. Obviously, we want it to. We love that first one to be right at the practice test scores. But I think generally, like to have your practice test scores in the range, then you can go in with confidence, and that's what you want. So I like
Mhm.
your approach a lot there. That's really good. And then, are there any details in terms of mindset or routines that you had in terms of day of the exam,
Mhm.
or just in general, like for example, food, sleep, exercise, any
Mhm.
sort of mindfulness thing or mantras, self-talk, because self-talk,
Yeah.
like it's becoming a little more mainstream with sports psychology and everything, but
Yeah, absolutely.
it's a good topic. Yeah.
Yeah. So leading up to it, the few days before it, I definitely like stayed active, kept up with my exercise, got a lot of sleep, ate good foods, didn't drink. And I think those things leading up to it are definitely gonna make an impact. The morning of didn't really do anything too much. Had breakfast, went in, and I don't know if I had like a specific mantra or like saying, but it was just trying to stay relaxed, stay, you know, don't stress too much. Like at the end of the day, it's just a couple hours. It's one test. I mean, it's not going to determine your life or anything. So just stay loose, stay confident but not cocky. Um, and then kind of on the way over, I was just uh, running through some like mental math in my head, just kind of to prep to jump into it. Um, and yeah, so I think just stay loose is my big picture advice.
Yeah, that's definitely good. I like that. Um, and earlier you were saying, yeah, personal preference on the time of day. Definitely agree with that. Although I would say like there just was some kind of general research that I saw
Mhm.
that was like on average, the average person, and you have to, I would say experiment for and find what works for you. There was some interesting research that like for the average person, they don't hit like a peak activation, like attention for the first like 3 hours. So I thought that was kind of
Mhm.
interesting that
Hmm. It is
probably a
interesting.
lot of
Yeah.
people feel that way, but it's just like validating. It's kind of validating to see the research that like, oh, my
Right.
brain's not messed up, that like I can't focus best at, say I
Yep.
wake at 7 and have a test at 8. Like the average person's like 3 to 4 hours. And then I think like maybe on average, there's kind of a dip in energy in the afternoon. So it does depend a lot on chronotype and sleep cycles and different things. But experiment with that. But just maybe for me personally, that's kind of based on that research and also my own experience, kind of thinking of late morning. The nice thing is with the online version, you do have way more control over the time. Pretty much within 2 days, whenever I've checked, it's pretty much been everything wide open. It tends to be a little bit harder in person. Did you do the online versus in person?
I did both tests in person. Yeah.
In person.
And
Okay. Yeah.
and theoretically, you can choose from all pretty much any time during the day. It's
Okay.
not like it's you can only start at 9 or only in the afternoon. But practically most of the slots are filled, so you really have to look
Right.
around and
Right. Right.
maybe
Yeah.
not go to your first choice test center. So
Right. Right.
yeah.
Right. Cool. And someone asked about the actual length of time, the timeline of the whole prep process.
The whole prep process was I think maybe 4 months. So I
4 months.
started in early 2023, and I took my first test in May, and then the second
Okay.
one, whatever the 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks, whatever the limit
Right.
is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. 16 days. Cool.
Yep. Yeah. I would definitely say probably the biggest factor in how much you're going to get out of this is if you leave yourself enough time to thoroughly go through the test. I know some people who, um, they had their application deadline coming up relatively soon, and they, had to kind of rush through studying and take the test. And I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you do that. Um,
Right.
take
Totally.
the time to do it for real and commit to it.
Yeah, totally. Give yourself time, commit to it, for sure. And what did you find most challenging of anything? I mean, it sounds like you were making good progress, but was
Mhm.
there any certain question types or the process itself? I mean, probably it sounds like the biggest individual obstacle was that that one score that was disappointing. But were
Yeah,
there
yeah,
any other ups and downs, like little mini ones, or it sounds like you had a pretty good attitude about it overall.
mhm.
That's helpful. Of like, okay, I'm not gonna like stay relaxed and stuff. But I'm just curious,
Yeah,
how any challenges you had.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like it was easy or like
Right.
it was definitely there were challenges. I would say the biggest thing is like you really have to put your ego aside for a lot of this. Like during this studying, you're going to get a lot of things wrong, and you have to be okay with that and be able to keep it open mind and keep going. I mean, there were specific types of questions that I just took me forever. If to get if I ever did. There were some that, you know, I had my test scheduled. I still didn't have time to really figure some stuff out. Some of the like number theory, a lot of the geometry I thought I knew, and then I would just get it wrong anyway. So um, specific stuff like that. I thought some of the reading comprehension stuff was harder just because it's more ambiguous. Um, so I certainly don't want to make it sound like I knew everything going into it, and so it's okay to get things wrong and not know everything, and things will still go all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great point. And I think it was interesting earlier. It kind of connects to this question of what's the main difference in skill and mindset between V40 and V50. Sounded like you were really trying hard to get everything right, but
Yeah.
accepting that some mistakes would happen. And so I guess I would say for that V51, like you said, some things have to go right, but then also that if you have enough time that you can really do give a good effort and not just have to guess too much. Right. I think that's a factor. And then just having the skill set where your overall accuracy is high. And then, on maybe the ones you have to coin flip, like you said, it went, or the question selection you get. But any other thoughts on that question? That's kind of an interesting one.
Yeah. I don't know if there's too much of a mindset difference. I mean, at that level, I think V40 is getting like a small handful wrong. So
Right.
it really comes down to, question selection, luck. Maybe if you're taking too much time, you have to rush through a few more. And then maybe just knowing the source material better, being able to work through it faster. So I don't think it's a huge difference. So on the first real test, I got a like V44. So it was
Right.
the same person, 2 different days, like
Right.
2 weeks apart. Once you're at that level, it's just almost splitting hairs.
Right. Yeah. So I actually do know from the ESRs that a 44 for me and probably similar for you. I think it was around 3 errors. My V48 was 1 error, and then the 51 is obviously none. So
exactly.
So I did. I mean, for me personally, I did make some strides in there. That actually one of the differences was I did actually take the TTP course, and like this SC went to like so much more detail. Like I'd been teaching this and like taking some other books and stuff, but it went into like extra detail, and there were some like, whoa, like, oh, okay, I didn't know that, like kind of pretty advanced rules, like, and ways of breaking it down. So yeah, actually that was actually pretty interesting for me and helped me from my 44 to 48. But again, it was only like 2 questions difference. But it is like pretty. It is like some challenge there for sure. Yeah.
Right, and that's a good point too about like the like in more advanced rules. Like it might help you get 1 question every like 2 to 3 tests, but at this level, that's really what you're looking for. So if you have the basics and you have the medium stuff and like some of the harder stuff, it just comes down to like having the time to learn the just the small stuff that might come up and being prepared for that. So if you have the time, great. If not, I wouldn't worry about getting the 98 percentile hard questions. Do your best, and it's just 1 question.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and on that topic, I wanted to emphasize that master the mediums is really a good mantra. And we, especially on the quant, there was a case study that I've mentioned on another interview before. I think that someone posted on Reddit where they got they only got 1 of 12 questions that were hard rated. So let's see how to phrase this. There were different case studies where they got 11 wrong in the same order on the quant section. And one score was like a 27, one was a 49. The 49 was only got 1 out of 12 of the hard questions correct, but all the rest were correct. So all the easy and medium were correct, and 1 of 12 that were rated hard on GMAT Club. So there were still some hard mediums that they got correct, but 1 of 12 hard, and that ended in a 49. So that's like a pretty, and I've also seen on official test ESRs, 9 errors, so only 70% correct, ending in 49. So that 50 and 51 is a little bit harsher in terms of the scoring, but that 49, there is some room for error It might not always be that many errors, not necessarily at all, but it can vary quite a bit. But if you are getting hard questions, there is some flexibility there. So that idea of like master the mediums, nice if you can get some of those hards as well, obviously, but
right.
Really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what I'm about to say applies more towards the verbal than the quant necessarily, but if you really, really, really know your mediums and that kind of level of understanding, some of the hard questions you're going to be able to see almost immediately. It's like in a medium, the answer is more obvious, but a hard question, it's still going to be the same answer. They just kind of hide it better. But the
Right.
better you know it and can just like identify it, you almost won't even notice that it's a hard question.
Exactly right. Yeah, I love that. That's a good point. And then so when those mediums are really mastered, then the hards become a lot easier. So great point on that. Let's see. So let's see. Any other advice? I think you actually had some other good things in your notes about ego, algebra, kind of mindset, not wellness. Was there any other advice? Want to jump into that? I think let's maybe just start with the ego one. Like put your ego aside. I thought that was a good mantra.
Yeah. I think we touched on that earlier, but that I think is key. This is not a test that's designed to have perfect scores. So almost everybody in the world going into it is going to get things wrong. And you have to be okay with that and don't let it slow you down or distract you. Just move on, stick to the process. As long as you stick to the process, you'll get better and it'll work out. It's definitely tough sometimes when you do like a TTP practice exam and get like 7 wrong in a row. And you're like, what am I even doing? Like, why am I bothering? But all that's doing is showing you where you need to study. So use the program and just stick with it, and you'll definitely get better.
Yeah, that's totally right. Yeah, and I found that even when I had my 770, I did find some of the verbal asked in like challenging, especially the sentence correction on some of those more advanced topics. So, like you said, don't let it get you get you down. There's another question came in here about how many hours on verbal versus quant, and a second question: how did you fix careless mistakes on quant? So that's a good question about preventing careless errors. Yeah.
I'm not sure the breakdown between the two. I think inherently I probably spent more time on quant just because there's more topics.
Right.
I think total studying and practice exams was maybe 175 to 200 hours split over 4 to 5 months. So hopefully that gives a good range of what to expect. But that's just me. Some people are going to be shorter, some are going to be more. I don't think there's a right or wrong length. Just it takes what it takes to finish the course and study and get ready. So, but hopefully that's a data point for everybody.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Careless errors on quant. I think the more familiar I was with the content, it went down, but also that was probably one of my biggest issues was like, especially if I knew how to do it, I would not be as careful or like not write as neatly or follow the process as I should have been. And that's been an issue for me like my entire life, like especially with math problems. I'm like, oh, I know how to do this. I'll just blah, 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 scratch some stuff down, pick an answer. But it's important to remind yourself not to skip ahead in the problem. So if it's a 3-step problem and you understand how to solve it, I wouldn't say excited, but I kind of started thinking ahead instead of doing the step that I was on.
Right.
So maybe that goes back to like the mantra you're talking about. Like the mantra was do each step and don't, go faster than you should be.
Right. Yeah. That's good. Very similar for me. Yeah. Studied a couple of years mechanical engineering and switched to business, but I would do the same thing, and I would, like rush, a bit, and right, because it is tempting with the time pressure to be like, oh, I'll save time, I'll bank time, right? But it's no good if you mess up the question, right?
Exactly. exactly.
So there
Yep.
is a paradox there of there's this mantra that other mantra I liked was like be quick but don't hurry. That's another John Wooden one where
Yep.
it's like and there's like another military one. It's something like slow is fast or something like what is it? Or correct.
Slow is smooth and
Slow is
smooth
smooth,
is
smooth is
fast.
fast. Okay,
Yeah,
I was
that's what it
missing
is. Yep. There's something there. Yeah.
Thank you for catching me. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It's not slow is fast. That's great. Okay, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And the same thing here, right? It's the same
Yep.
idea of like if you're structured about it, you're smooth about it. Going to be so much more both accurate and quick. So, and then there's other things there that I would suggest, like reread the question, before you choose it. Is there anything else that comes to mind like that? That's one that I often teach. Reread, double check the question, double check as you go, like anything that
Yep.
could be done backwards, I don't know. Does like as you're thinking about your error log, are there certain ones that come to mind?
Yeah.
It might have been. It's okay if not.
So you're not gonna like me as a teacher, but I like almost never double check things. I know I should. Just like once I'm done with it, I'm like, all right, we'll
Yeah,
move
I
on.
got you. I got you.
So that probably contributed a little bit, but I'm trying to think back of like what the different type of errors were. There were some where I didn't fully understand the concept and kept kind of trying to tell myself I did instead of just going back and sitting down and learning it.
Right.
That was definitely one of my weaker points. And then yeah, just kind of like you said, rushing things and
Right.
not taking my time.
Right. Yeah, for me, I mean, I noticed that, like, say a ratio, like I was frustrated with myself, but especially if you're tired or your mindfulness
Yeah.
isn't there. But the other day I took a practice test and it was like ratio of X to Y, and I tried to do my mantra of double checking things. I like double checked the math 3 times. It was like this super simple calculation, but I didn't double check rereading that it was ratio of X to Y versus Y to X. And so I look back, I'm like, oh no, I'm not
Yeah.
taking my own advice. And so those ones like are definitely frustrating. But the mindfulness to like, I say to reread exactly what it's asking for. Anything that could be backwards, just to like really be ensure. I guess if you do it right, if you're getting in the habit of doing it right the first time, maybe. For me, I like to like double check, but the only way that's possible is if you're fast enough on smooth enough on like knowing the content. So yeah. Any other thoughts on that and speed actually as well? Like I know time pressure. There were some questions earlier about how you handle time pressure.
So I think key, like the very first thing you need to make sure to do, and you'll get better at this as you study, but is like have your algebra like down cold. That is the basis for almost all the questions here. So if you have to think about how to do that, that's going to, trip you up and slow you down. You want to save your thinking to how to attack the problem, not how to, rearrange the equations and actually get your answer. So I think that was, I was definitely rusty when I started, got better, but that I think was key was getting that down. And that's the basis for basically the rest of the test. The other hint I would give or like tip or whatever is be really, really good at breaking down numbers into their factors, into their prime factors. That, especially without a calculator, is so much easier to, multiply, divide, cancel out things rather than doing like long division. So instead of having like, probably going to embarrass myself because it's been a minute, but like 320 over 18. If you tried doing that like long division, it would take me forever. I'm really bad at that, but I knew it could be broken down into like 32 times 10 over 9 times 2, and you keep bringing that down until eventually you have like 332 on the bottom, cancel out those on top, and then you have your answer on top.
That was great.
Yeah. That's my like little pro tip.
Great example. No, I love that. And the mantra for that to help you remember is simplify before multiply. So like, I guess, or sometimes it'll be broken down with multiple things on the top, like 8 times 7 times 6 over 5 times 4 times 3, or bigger numbers. But basically try and break things down and cross them off. That's like one of the best tips on speed with the calculation. And I love that you're emphasizing the algebra, because really that's totally true. And it connects to what we talked about earlier about the automaticity. You need to have those fundamentals really cold. So that's why I think in the course, it's like one of the very first lessons is the algebra. And
Yep.
really, if that's not strong at first, I would do extra practice on that, really getting that speed up. I talked about redos earlier. So I do recommend that people, if you are slow, it's fine to take that time the first time, but go back. You have in the custom test feature, you can look at all the problems that were over 2 minutes and redo those, redo your mistakes. Also, I would bookmark anything that's a guess as well. Yeah, so definitely use that error logger, like Adam said, and go
Yeah.
back and do that. So I love that.
Yeah. The thing about the guess was really good. That's good advice too. I did that. If I guessed on one, even if I thought I was probably going to be right, is if I didn't know for sure, I would flag it. So that way, even if I got it right, I could go back and look at it and go back and study. Because you're not really doing yourself any favors if you guess and get it right. Even
Right,
if you don't know how to do it, you still have to go
right,
learn. Yeah.
right, exactly. I think there was a question up there that I don't know if we covered fully. That was someone was asking how you approach the sentence correction. Any tips on that? And yeah,
I think the biggest tip that helped me out with that was always read the full sentence. Um, when I started, I was certainly just focused on the underline part, and then I kind of switched to just getting the context before and after the underline, but like literally read it out loud under your breath to yourself, the whole thing, replace it. And that prevented me from making a lot of mistakes.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's a good tip because a lot of there are a lot of them, especially the harder ones, will hinge on the meaning of it. And the
Mhm.
other thing is that there could just be a direct grammar issue that's affecting the whole sentence in the non-underlined portion. So
Yep.
to be more specific, like there might be like an and there that pretty common actually. They'll put like an and in the non-underlined portion, and then if you notice that, you can attack that, find the see the parallelism. I often encourage people to, more quickly eliminate the most obvious grammar issues and getting really, really strong on that. And then there can be some more advanced, trickier meaning things that you might have to spend longer thinking about.
Mhm.
One other tip, I don't know if you use this one, but I actually got this one from GMAT Club originally several years ago, which was a finger technique on process of elimination. So
Mhm.
your pinky, if you're right-handed, would represent A, and then B here, C, D, E. So on
Mhm.
especially sentence correction, which is going away, but also good on the rest of verbal, is like, say
Yep.
we got A, A, C, E or A and E are eliminated on the first try. We go get rid of those. Now we're down to these
Mhm.
two. And is that one little trick you found, or what
Um,
that one?
yeah, I actually think I have used that a few times,
Right.
more so when I was studying and like not in a place where I was like a great place to like I would bring my laptop with me to some
Oh, I see. Yeah,
places.
yeah.
And I didn't want to break out the notebook. So I did use it kind of informally. On the
Right.
test, I was a bit more structured and I would just write A, B, C, D, E
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
straight down in a line. And then you could cross them out. You could circle things you might want to do. And I think that was another thing that really helped me improve was at the beginning, I was just staring at the screen and then
Right.
choosing an answer. But this
Right.
way,
Right.
cross off what you know is wrong and it helps you
Right, for
organize your
sure.
thoughts a lot
For
better. Yeah.
sure. For sure. Being proactive with either method is good. I
Yep.
think the advantage of the paper, the trade-off is um, the paper, maybe you can have like that question mark of ones to go back to, where it's a little bit harder with the finger.
Mhm.
Kind of the way I would do it with the finger that I liked is just then it's like less up and down, like in terms of time. It sounds
Yeah.
like
You can
the
just feel
more
it.
traditional way is the paper. Yeah, to just feel it. It does take practice though for that tip. So if you just have patience with yourself, if you decide to try that one, um, yeah. And then let's see, there was a question here about tricks for RC. How do you
Mhm.
approach by reading? How does he approach RC by reading the whole passage? How much time did he take in long passages?
Yeah. Trying to think back so I read through the whole thing at first um, before looking at the questions so I could kind of center my mind on what it was going to be about. And then I think I did this a bit differently than what I think TTP suggests and what other people suggest, but I would read the question and then I would go back and read what I remembered to be the relevant passages. So I kind of spent some time rereading things, which If you're pressed for time, isn't the best strategy. But on some of the other questions, I made up some time, so this kind of worked out for me. And then I would just go to like where I thought was relevant, read through a few times until I was more certain of the answer. I was more focused on getting it right. So I could go back a few times and check and go back to the question, go back to the passage rather than trying to get through those questions quicker. And I think it balances out because you get 3 or 4 questions about each passage. So you save a lot of time in the end if you just spend a lot of time in the beginning really understanding it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, when I definitely encourage going back to the passage a lot to reread. There's definitely different approaches. I guess my personal bias is to spend a little bit less time on the very first reading and a little bit, but definitely a lot of time going back to the passage once you know what each question is focused on. So if you know, a lot of times it'll be only focused on a half sentence, a full sentence, 2 sentences, because it's asking about a very specific thing. And so you do that first read, you get an idea of the structure. And then based on the question, you know where to focus, but you definitely do want to go back, make sure you're totally accurate. So I think we're totally on the same page with that.
Yeah.
And then, it kind of can depend on your reading speed and everything in terms of how everything works out. Yeah. So cool. Let's see.
So I actually just thought of another one for sentence correction.
Good. Great.
Once you get really good at it, the real world will kind of annoy you because the sentences that the GMAT asks you to write are very formal, stilted, academic English, and that's not how the real world talks. But one good study tip is just in your like everyday life, you will find tons of examples of things that are wrong. So like break down random sentences and pick out the grammar there. And then I think that's good to just kind of keep things fresh. And then once you take the GMAT and you're done, you try to purge that from your mind so you're not constantly annoyed at how things are written. But while studying, it's a good thing to do.
I love that, actually, and that brings us to a great topic, which I'm glad you thought of it. Is trying to apply this stuff to your real life as much as you can. Connecting it is super powerful, super helpful. Were there any other ways that you tried to connect things, maybe from critical reasoning, from or any other reading you were doing helped with reading comp or quant? Maybe like I often encourage, for example, like just going throughout your day, like calculating percentages, maybe instead of pulling out your calculator, like,
that was
what's that meat? What's that meat does count saving me? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that was a big one. Was I tried to commit to not using a calculator. So like in the grocery store, trying to figure out like what the sale price is, and just staring around. I'm like that one, or just like if you see percentages throughout the day, just try to calculate them real quick. Once you do it enough, your mental math will kind of like start developing some tricks, or like start being able to really understand the relationships between numbers instead of having to calculate things. And I think once you hit that stage, that's really helpful.
Totally. Yeah, the mental math does help a lot, especially now with you have a little bit more quant into the score. Well, it kind of depends how you calculate it, but you have the you actually do have the calculator on the data insights, but it is going to take extra time where you don't really need it. On a lot of the calculations are pretty basic. It's like just estimating 10% of something. It's like you just drop the 0, right? Or as you get a little bit, 10% maybe is easy, but then you like 5%, it's half of 10%. Some of these things, as you get comfortable with it, it's just a what do you call it? Arithmetic fluency that we want. Like I love that idea of like fluency of it just becoming more automatic.
Yeah, and another thing too is you're going to pick up like a lot of those little tricks. Just one off the top of my head is like trying to figure out. I had a lot of trouble with like dividing by 15 or like 15%. And switch. So what I did was take 10%, find what 20% is, and it's going to be halfway in between there.
Oh, that's a pretty good one. Yeah.
So like that made some things a lot quicker. So it's as you go, you're going to find the things you get annoyed with and find the workarounds, and then you can just use those workarounds and be more comfortable with it.
Totally. That's great. And then one other thing I encourage is like trying to think about your why. I don't in terms of both big picture, in terms of the MBA or whatever your bigger goals are, your career, And then also trying to like think about what am I actually gaining from the process itself in terms of like useful skills. Because I think a lot of times people come into test prep, it's like, oh, this stupid chore I have to do. Why do I have to do this? Like this is like, especially like you gave the example, the sentence correction, not feeling so much like real life.
Yep.
But within the different sections, did you try to connect it to real life and feel like bring a little bit, more positive mindset by like thinking about how this is useful?
Mhm. Yeah. So I would say you kind of talked about like your big picture goals. I think that was super helpful as motivation.
Right.
So I knew I kept telling myself, or like I kept feeling like, oh man, I want to, I want to get into a good school, get this job that I want. What can I do today to help me get there? Applications are almost a year away. 8 months, 9 months. So to get into a good school, I need to do a good application. To have a good application, a good score is going to help me. What can I do today to help me get to that score and put me in a better place down the road? So I think that was really good to help me stay focused when this whole process seems really, really long and tedious.
Right.
You're not going to do everything in a day, so just do what you can that day to give yourself another step forward. Break things down into smaller pieces. And then especially on the quant side, I mean, I work in engineering, so it's definitely not as like number and arithmetic-y as you would think. But there are
Right.
things where I see things throughout my day where getting back into the practice of just math and mental math and understanding the numbers, it's cropped up. I wouldn't say it really has a huge effect on my life, but just nice to see how it is actually applicable.
Right. Totally. And as much as you can trick yourself, even if it doesn't
Yeah.
apply all the time. I mean, not necessarily trick yourself fully, but just like celebrate every little way that it does
Yeah.
connect. Like
Yeah.
noticing even the fact that I think the fact that you're being more attentive to like the grammar and stuff. Like I have people giving me feedback like, oh, I'm noticing all these more details in just the writing. Even if
Yeah.
you're not necessarily going to write that way exactly, you are more attentive to the meaning. Is like an
Absolutely.
example
Yeah.
I've heard of like, wait, like I'm actually rewording my thing, maybe not to be totally compatible with the exact GMAT style, but at least like I'm more aware of the meaning of like, is that a little bit confusing?
Yeah.
And so that's like in terms of where I put that word, like, is that, yeah. So I think it's kind of a funny one because we write so much that it's like, it really can come up quite a
Yeah,
bit.
you never really think about how you write before, and this really shines a spotlight on it. On how
Yeah,
to,
that's pretty
put
cool.
your thoughts together. Yep.
That's cool. And for the critical reasoning, that's the one I think potentially is the most useful in real life because it's like with causation, you see so many advertisements. That's actually one where I've been telling my students, especially more recently, to like, as you see advertisements, like think about like how, what kind of causation like assumptions are going on there or just, even a medical study, right? Are they leaping to conclusions there? Or right, your friend says, "Oh, I took this pill and then I had this result." Are you sure it was the pill, or did you do something else,
Right.
or you're doing your own experiments on yourself? With biohacking, right? And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
shoot, I know too much critical reasoning. I kind of wish I could say that this totally worked, but I really don't know because causation is kind of sketchy, right? In terms of,
Yeah.
But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think critical reasoning, and I think the quant version of that is like probability. Is if you understand those two things, it's definitely going to show up in your everyday life. Just being able to reason through. There's so much information coming at you, especially these days. It's how do you take in that information and process it and then make a decision. And so the the reasoning is how to do that in English or whichever language it happens to be, and then the probability is how do you apply numbers to uncertainty. And I think those two are going to be very helpful to anybody, even if even outside the context of the GMAT.
Totally. That's great. Cool. Well, I think we covered a lot. I'm trying to think if there were any more good tips you had in your notes. Does anything else come to mind that we didn't focus on? I think there was one thing I'm seeing here. Just realizing that the GMAT's just part of the application. It's not everything.
Yeah.
And I think you were telling me also like with your self-talk to not realize not go down that rabbit hole of like, oh, my life is over, right? Like, because there's this mindfulness book that I was reading, beyond the content, that it's actually another TTP instructor wrote. Pretty cool. But it's like, there's this thing, I forget, but he has these archetypes of like brain patterns, right? That we'll do of like, it actually, he would have students, and he gives examples in the book, and it's pretty common actually. You're like, oh, I got this wrong, so I'm going to fail the test, so I'm not going to get into school, so I'm not going to, my career is going to be over, and I'm not going to, meet my love, or, like, you have this like jumping to conclusions. My career's over, my life's over, right? It's like, it sounds crazy, but people do that to at least some degree, like, of like, leaping at least maybe a couple steps. I failed this question, I'm going to fail the test, right? So it's like, anyway, any more thoughts on that mindset? And
yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to keep things in perspective. GMAT is not everything. It's not, they don't take the applications and sort them by the number, and that's who gets in. It's, I think business school overall is one of the most holistic evaluations. I mean, you look at something like law school, and look at Harvard Law School, the median GPA is like a 3.98, and the LSAT's like a 179 out of 180, and that's just not the case for kind of the GMAT. So it's important, but it's not everything. Look at, the class profiles of all these top schools, and there's such a huge range of scores and GPAs and experiences that at some point you're going to have to take the GMAT, you're done with the test, and your time is better spent focusing on other things rather than, trying to increase your score by 10 or maybe 20 points.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. So stay focused and diligent while you're studying and taking the test, and do things the right way. But once it's done, don't stress, because there are people with lower scores than you who have gotten in, and there are people with higher scores who have not gotten in. So it's not the only thing.
That's right. That's great to keep it in perspective and look at the big picture. That's right. It is just a certain percentage. Maybe one of the studies, I think, from the admissions said around 20% or something. And then there's like 10 other categories of things. So you may need to, want to be, you do obviously do want it higher. It is one of the bigger of those 10 things. And, there may be a minimum ish, like, for your, given your background, that that makes you competitive. But look at the big picture. Also, I'll just highlight one other thing you said in the notes, just as a reminder for everyone: take care of yourself. Do your studying, be disciplined. Like, decide what you're going to give up, but don't give up your sleep, your wellness. Take care of yourself. We want everyone staying healthy and their brains, strong. One quick story on that is, like, I had a client that, like, between when they were super tired from work, they took a practice test 620, really disappointed, and then they went up to 740 just a week later, within a week. 120 point difference between being, like, well rested and a good mindset. So definitely take care of yourselves. And want to thank actually, we do have one more announcement before we jump off. So we do have a Halloween sale for the TTP. So the code, I think, should be in the chat and maybe in the comments. It is Halloween and caps 15% off. That includes the live teach that I'm teaching as well. I got another cohort coming up December. And so check that out. You can do the trial. And huge thanks again to Adam. Congrats again on your score. Actually, one question I meant to ask you before we jump off is, what's the what's your plan for applying? Do you know where you want to go or do exactly? Or
so I kind of work in construction real estate to switch more towards the business side of that. And I also have a really big interest in sustainable food and agriculture. So working for a company either developing spaces for, like, food tech startups, or kind of working with, like, a bigger food company to work on their all their real estate and asset management stuff. So we'll see how it goes. I want to stay in the Northeast, so handful of schools around here, and don't want to jinx things too much, but we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure you'll do great, and wishing you the best with everything. And thanks so much again to Adam. Please, as a reminder, put into the comments what you learned, and thank Adam for his time. And we really appreciate you. And everybody, thanks for coming, and have a great day. And good luck with your prep.
All right. Good luck, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.